In the heart of New York City, 19-year-old Emily Thompson, daughter of a wealthy CEO, faces a life-changing tragedy after a car accident leaves her paralyzed. Despite the best doctors, therapies, and every luxury money can buy, hope seems lost. That is, until Jake, a kind-hearted 25-year-old mechanic, enters her life. With patience, care, and unwavering belief, he helps her take the first steps toward recovery. This inspiring journey is one of courage, determination, and the power of human connection. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Emily Thompson, the 19-year-old daughter of a wealthy CEO, had always lived a life most people could only dream of. Her days were filled with luxuries, private tutors, designer clothes, and family trips across the globe. New York City was her playground, and she moved through it with confidence and charm. But in one cruel moment, her life changed forever. A car accident on a rainy evening left her paralyzed from the waist down. The hospital room, with its sterile smell and blinking monitors, became her new reality. The bright lights of fame and fortune could no longer mask the emptiness she felt inside. The accident itself had been brief but brutal. Emily remembered the screech of tires, the violent impact, and the sudden, disorienting darkness. Her parents, Richard and Olivia Thompson, had arrived at the hospital moments later, faces pale with panic. They had always believed money could solve any problem, but nothing in their vast fortune prepared them for the sight of their daughter lying still, unable to move. Doctors were honest yet cautious, explaining that recovery was uncertain. Emily's legs would likely remain immobile, and therapy would be slow, painful, and emotionally draining. It was a truth that crushed her heart. In the first weeks after the accident, Emily found herself trapped in a cycle of despair. She hated the wheelchair, hated the feeling of dependency, and hated the pity in her parents' eyes. Every luxury around her, the marble floors, the expensive gadgets, the private nurse, felt meaningless. She couldn't go outside without assistance, couldn't dress herself, couldn't even feed herself properly without frustration. Her parents tried to console her with gifts and reassurances, but nothing could reach her spirit. She began to withdraw, spending hours staring out of her penthouse window at the bustling city below, remembering a time when her body had obeyed her commands freely. Therapists came and went, each trying a different method to bring hope or mobility. Some suggested advanced surgeries, others focused on physical therapy exercises, and some even offered experimental treatments. Emily participated half-heartedly, her mind always returning to the accident, to the life she had lost, and to the freedom she once took for granted. Each attempt at recovery that failed only deepened her depression. The walls of her penthouse felt like a prison, and the city outside seemed distant and unreachable. She began to speak less, smile less, and even her closest friends stopped visiting. Emily's world had narrowed to the small, confining space of her room. Her parents, overwhelmed and desperate, hired the best medical specialists money could buy. Yet Emily's heart remained untouched. Her father, Richard, a successful CEO, and her mother, Olivia, a philanthropist with a busy social life, tried to keep themselves composed. They whispered behind closed doors, frustrated that even their influence and wealth could not change the circumstances. Emily, sensing their worry, felt guilty, but also increasingly isolated. Every glance of concern reminded her that she had become a burden in a life she had once loved. She longed for someone who would see her not as a patient or a project, but as Emily, the vibrant young woman she used to be. One rainy afternoon, while Emily sat near the window watching the city lights blur in the downpour, a knock echoed through the penthouse. A young man, soaked from the rain, stood at the door. He introduced himself as Jake Carter, a 25-year-old mechanic called to repair the Thompson family's vintage car collection. Unlike the doctors and specialists, Jake did not speak with airs of authority or pity. His hands were rough and calloused, his clothes simple, and yet his eyes were kind, bright, and unassuming. Emily, curious yet skeptical, watched as he moved confidently around the car, noticing every detail. There was a genuineness about him that money and status could not buy. As Jake worked, he glanced occasionally at Emily, who remained seated in her wheelchair. He spoke casually about the cars, asking questions, joking lightly, but never treating her as fragile or incapable. Emily, unused to being treated as a person rather than a patient, felt a strange warmth. Her curiosity grew as he explained the mechanics of the vehicles, how he fixed engines and restored broken parts. Something about his words, his confidence, and his unassuming nature struck a chord in her. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a spark of interest in the world beyond her wheelchair. She listened, intrigued by someone who seemed to care about skill, passion, and dedication rather than wealth or social status. Days passed, and Jake returned regularly to continue his work on the Thompson cars. Each visit, he brought a sense of normalcy and purpose that Emily had not experienced since the accident. They spoke about cars, music, the city, and even dreams for the future. Emily found herself laughing again, a sound that had been absent for months. Her parents noticed the change, but did not fully understand the bond forming. Jake had no agenda beyond helping with the cars, yet his presence had a profound effect on Emily. She began to see the possibility of life beyond her wheelchair, a life where small steps and genuine connections could bring meaning and joy. One afternoon, as Jake finished repairing an engine, he turned to Emily and said gently, "I want to help you stand again." Emily laughed nervously, disbelief and hope mingling in her heart. "You can't," she whispered. But Jake only smiled, unshaken by her doubt. His confidence, simple and unwavering, planted a seed of hope. He explained that with patience, exercises, and determination, they could attempt small steps together. Emily felt a flicker of excitement and fear. For the first time, someone offered more than sympathy. He offered belief, encouragement, and effort. That belief was more powerful than any treatment, more inspiring than any specialist. The next days marked the beginning of a new routine. Jake would arrive each morning and guide Emily through gentle stretches and balance exercises. He never rushed her, never pushed her beyond her limits, and never treated her as weak. Emily, though skeptical at first, began to anticipate his visits. She started to participate actively, trying movements she had thought impossible. Each small success, each minor improvement, brought joy and determination. For the first time since the accident, Emily felt a sense of control, a sense that her body might once again respond to her will. Jake's patience and sincerity became the foundation for her gradual recovery. As the weeks went by, Emily began to experience emotions she had long forgotten. Excitement, hope, and curiosity replaced despair and resignation. Jake's unwavering belief in her potential became a source of strength. Emily realized that wealth and privilege could not heal her spirit. Genuine care, attention, and belief in her abilities were what truly mattered. The walls of isolation and fear that had surrounded her began to crumble. And though the road to walking again was long and uncertain, Emily had found a companion, a teacher, and a friend who made her believe that even after tragedy, life could still offer moments of beauty, laughter, and courage. Emily's mornings began to hold a new sense of purpose. Instead of staring out of her penthouse window at the city, she looked forward to Jake's arrival. The young mechanic entered with a friendly smile, his tools in hand, ready to guide her through exercises designed not just for strength, but for hope. Each session, he encouraged her gently, praising even the smallest movements. Emily found herself laughing again, something she had not done in months. The physical challenges were daunting, but the presence of someone who genuinely believed in her ability made her want to try, even when she feared failure. Jake's approach was different from the therapists she had met. He did not treat her like fragile glass. He treated her like a partner in a mission. He taught Emily techniques to strengthen her core, improve balance, and regain some control over her legs. At first, Emily could barely lift herself, and even small exercises left her exhausted and frustrated. Yet Jake never rushed her. He celebrated every tiny success, every small twitch of movement with enthusiasm. His unwavering support created a safe environment where failure was not humiliating. And every step, even if just a shift in weight, was a victory. Outside the sessions, Emily began to notice changes in herself. Mentally, she felt lighter. The dark cloud of depression that had settled over her for months began to lift. She started engaging with her parents more, laughing at small jokes, and even joining them for short meals rather than isolating herself in her room. Her friends, initially hesitant to return, began to visit as well, drawn by the subtle glow of confidence Emily was regaining. Jake, though focused on his work, noticed these improvements too. He understood that recovery was not only about the body, but also about reigniting hope and independence. One day, after a particularly challenging exercise, Emily looked at Jake with a mixture of determination and apprehension. "Do you really think I can walk again?" she asked quietly. Jake crouched to her level, meeting her gaze. "I believe you can," he said simply. Those words, spoken with such calm certainty, struck Emily deeply. She realized that no medical report, no diagnosis, and no expensive treatment had ever offered her this kind of faith. Jake's belief was tangible, infectious, and empowering. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine standing, even if just for a few seconds, and perhaps even walking one day. As weeks turned into months, Emily's strength grew steadily. With Jake's guidance, she learned to shift her weight, balance herself on parallel bars, and even take tentative steps with assistance. Each attempt was followed by exhaustion, but also by exhilaration. Jake cheered her on, holding her hands, offering steady support, and always reminding her that progress, no matter how slow, was still progress. Emily felt a sense of accomplishment she had not experienced since before the accident. Her muscles, previously weak and unresponsive, were slowly obeying her commands, and her confidence in herself began to blossom alongside her physical strength. The bond between Emily and Jake deepened beyond teacher and student. They shared stories, dreams, and frustrations. Emily learned about his humble beginnings, the challenges he faced growing up, and how he had become a skilled mechanic through perseverance and passion. Jake, in turn, listened to Emily's fears, her aspirations, and the pressures of growing up in wealth and privilege. Their conversations became a safe space where neither felt judged. Emily realized that her progress was not just about therapy. It was about connection, understanding, and human compassion. Jake's presence reminded her that life could still hold meaningful relationships and genuine support. One afternoon, Emily decided to attempt a particularly challenging exercise alone, without Jake holding her hands. She positioned herself carefully, her legs trembling beneath her, heart racing with both fear and anticipation. Slowly, she lifted herself slightly, a flicker of movement that had seemed impossible months before. Jake's eyes widened, filled with pride and encouragement. He clapped lightly and smiled, letting her revel in the small victory. Emily laughed, a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the penthouse. That tiny step, though not a full stand, represented something far greater, the rekindling of hope, the belief that she could regain control of her life. Her parents watched these sessions with awe and gratitude. Olivia and Richard Thompson had always relied on their wealth to solve problems, but they had never encountered a situation where money alone could heal. Seeing Emily's perseverance and Jake's dedication, they felt humbled. They began participating in her exercises, learning to encourage rather than instruct. The family dynamic shifted subtly from one of anxious protection to one of active support. Emily's confidence inspired them as much as her progress. She was no longer a helpless girl in a wheelchair. She was a young woman fighting to reclaim her life with courage, determination, and the support of someone who truly cared. As the city lights of New York shimmered through the penthouse windows each evening, Emily and Jake often stayed late, reviewing the day's exercises and discussing plans for the next session. They joked, teased, and shared quiet moments of reflection. Emily realized that this consistent presence, this unwavering patience, was as vital as the physical therapy itself. Jake's dedication taught her that true care comes not from wealth or obligation, but from empathy, effort, and belief in someone's potential. Slowly, Emily's fear of falling and failing was replaced by curiosity, courage, and the willingness to try again and again. Months of persistent effort led to tangible results. Emily began standing for longer periods with Jake's support, shifting her weight with confidence and even taking a few assisted steps across the room. Each small milestone fueled her desire to push further. She documented her progress, celebrating every success, however minor, and learned to forgive herself for every setback. Jake's guidance and encouragement never wavered. The penthouse, once a place of isolation, transformed into a space of determination, laughter, and growth. Emily's journey was no longer defined by her paralysis, but by her resilience, courage, and the bonds she had formed along the way. By the end of this chapter of her recovery, Emily had regained not only physical strength, but also a sense of self-worth and independence. She had learned to balance determination with patience, hope with realistic expectations, and courage with humility. Jake, the humble mechanic, had become more than a teacher. He was a friend, a mentor, and a reminder that genuine human connection could overcome obstacles that money and privilege could not. Emily understood that her journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, she felt alive, empowered, and ready to embrace the possibility of standing on her own. Months of persistence and dedication had led Emily Thompson to a point she had once thought impossible. Her muscles, though still weak, responded with greater control, and her confidence in her body's potential grew daily. Every session with Jake Carter strengthened not only her legs, but also her belief in herself. The penthouse, once a place of isolation and despair, had transformed into a center of growth, laughter, and determination. Each movement she mastered, no matter how small, became a celebration. Jake's patience and unwavering belief had been the catalyst, guiding her through pain, frustration, and fear toward something far greater than mobility, hope. One golden morning, sunlight streamed through the tall New York windows, illuminating the penthouse in warm, inspiring light. Emily positioned herself at the parallel bars, her hands gripping tightly as Jake stood beside her, offering steady support. Her heart raced with anticipation, fear and excitement all at once. Today, she thought, might be the day she could truly stand on her own, even for a few seconds. Months of therapy, effort, and perseverance had built to this moment. The city outside seemed to pause, as if it too were holding its breath, waiting for her first triumphant rise from the wheelchair that had confined her for so long. Emily took a deep breath and focused on the instructions Jake had patiently repeated countless times. She planted her feet firmly, feeling the tremor in her legs, and slowly began to push herself upward. Jake's hands hovered lightly at her sides, ready to catch her if needed, but he allowed her independence. The first few inches were excruciating, her muscles screaming in protest, yet she persisted. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized she was actually rising. The fear that had haunted her since the accident mingled with exhilaration. For the first time in months, she felt gravity supporting her effort rather than restraining her, and a new sense of freedom washed over her. As she straightened slightly, Emily felt her legs wobble under her weight. Jake instinctively steadied her with a gentle touch, whispering encouragement. "You've got this." "Take it slow," he said softly. She nodded, focusing entirely on balance, on the small movements that would keep her upright. Every muscle, every fiber of her being was engaged in this delicate struggle. Slowly, inch by inch, she stood taller. The penthouse seemed to fade into the background, leaving only Emily, her trembling legs, and the quiet reassurance of Jake's presence. Her body, once betrayed by paralysis, now cooperated in a fragile yet victorious alliance. Emily's parents, watching from nearby, could hardly contain their emotions. Olivia covered her mouth to stifle a sob, while Richard's eyes glistened with pride. Wealth had never felt so powerless, Yet the sight of their daughter standing, supported by determination and genuine care, was more moving than any luxury could provide. Friends who had returned to check on Emily witnessed the scene in awe. The room filled with unspoken reverence, as everyone realized that the miracle before them was not just physical, it was emotional, psychological, and profoundly human. Emily, standing for the first time, embodied resilience, courage, and the power of belief. With Jake's guidance, Emily took her first tentative steps. Each movement was calculated, careful, and fraught with fear, but also immense joy. The penthouse floor, polished and gleaming, reflected her image, almost as if confirming her progress. She laughed through tears, a sound of pure triumph. Each step, no matter how small, was a declaration that paralysis could not define her life. Jake remained close, offering support but allowing her autonomy. This delicate balance of independence and encouragement created a transformative moment, both for Emily and for everyone witnessing her journey from despair to empowerment. The weeks that followed saw rapid improvement. Emily practiced standing, walking with support, and balancing exercises several times a day. Her body grew stronger, her movements more confident, and her spirit soared. Jake continued to guide her, adjusting techniques and encouraging incremental progress. Emily began to move through the penthouse independently for short distances, sometimes laughing at her own wobbling steps. The fear that had once dominated her thoughts was replaced by exhilaration, determination, and hope. Each achievement, no matter how minor, reinforced her belief that the impossible was now within reach, and that she could reclaim the life she had once feared lost forever. The bond between Emily and Jake strengthened even further. Their relationship, built on trust, patience, and mutual respect, became a source of inspiration for everyone around them. Emily admired his humility, dedication, and unwavering belief in her potential. Jake, in turn, respected her courage, resilience, and commitment to growth. Together, they had forged a connection that transcended teacher and student, creating a partnership grounded in empathy and genuine care. Their interactions were filled with laughter, encouragement, and sometimes quiet reflection, reminding both that healing is as much about human connection as it is about physical therapy or medical intervention. Emily's parents, now actively involved in her rehabilitation, learned valuable lessons from Jake's approach. They witnessed firsthand that true healing requires patience, belief, and emotional support. Their daughter's progress humbled them, reinforcing the idea that love and empathy can achieve what money cannot. Emily, standing and moving with growing confidence, became a symbol of perseverance and hope for them. Each successful step she took was a victory not only for her, but for the family as a whole. The penthouse, once a place of luxury and isolation, transformed into a sanctuary of resilience, growth, and emotional connection. Eventually, Emily reached the point where she could stand unaided for several moments, balancing independently without support. The triumph was overwhelming. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the enormity of what she had accomplished. The room filled with applause, laughter, and joyous tears from friends and family. Jake smiled proudly, knowing that the true miracle was not just standing, but the combination of courage, trust, persistence, and human connection that had made it possible. Emily had not only reclaimed her body, but also her spirit, discovering that strength comes from within, guided by genuine care. By the end of part 3, Emily had transformed completely. She could walk short distances independently, with increasing confidence each day. Her fear had been replaced by hope, and her despair by determination. The experience reshaped her perspective on life, teaching her the value of perseverance, patience, and meaningful relationships. Jake remained a constant presence, offering guidance, encouragement, and friendship. Emily, now standing tall, understood that her journey was far from over, but that she possessed the courage and resilience to face whatever challenges lay ahead. What began as a tragedy had evolved into a story of empowerment, hope, and the triumph of the human spirit.